Of all the things that were stripped from the Black community during the Middle Passage, Black women's sense of industriousness was not one of them. For example, my great-great-grandmother, Hannah Butler, left Virginia after emancipation and traveled by covered wagon west, finally settling in a small town in Texas. There, starting from scratch, she built an amazing life for both herself and for her family. She passed that passion and drive and sense of self-determination, or kujichagulia, down to my great-grandmother, who then passed it on to my grandmother, who passed it to my mother, who passed it to me. Growing up, I've always known that my destiny would be intimately and intricately tied to Africa and to my community. As I traveled the world, I quickly began to realize that I wasn't the only one constantly hearing this drumbeat for Sankofa. And so, to commemorate the year of return, we decided to highlight other women whose drives and goals were also guiding them back to Africa. Ubuntu loosely translates to I am because we are. According to the 2018 Forbes article, the number of women-owned businesses grew by 58% from 2007 to 2018. The number of Black women-owned businesses grew by 164%, nearly 3 times that rate. While these numbers are impressive, another notable trend is the rise in Black women-owned businesses with specialized products and services that are intricately tied to Africa. As I forged my own path towards entrepreneurship, I began to wonder how other Black women use their sense of agency and connectedness to African-centered ideals to build African-centered businesses and enterprises. I also wondered how we might build lasting legacies within our own communities that would strive for generations to come. What were the personal motivations behind creating businesses, spaces, and enterprises focused specifically on African concepts, products, and services? My name is Valicia Tolliver, and I am the owner and operator of Ubuntu Coffee and Craft Bar. We are an importer of African coffee beans from all across the continent. We work specifically with micro growers and small cooperatives whose yield is such that they would otherwise not be able to compete in the global marketplace. My motivations are many. I think I started with my love of coffee. As far back as I can remember, my grandmother would let each of us as a treat kind of sip from the saucer as she had her morning coffee. My second motivation would be my desire to stay connected and rooted to Africa. All of our products, our crafts, our beans, everything is authentically African. And I think my biggest motivation is my family. I have a strong desire, a responsibility to leave a lasting legacy of self-determination, self-efficacy, entrepreneurship, drive for my children and for generations to come. Shakira Williams Reynolds, the owner of NSAA Adornments, was an exchange student at University of Legon when she was 21, and that semester was the beginning of her love affair with all things Ghana. She fell in love with the art, the fabric, the food, the music, the wood carvings, and the people. She started out selling handicrafts and accessories that she brought back from her many trips or that her Ghanaian friends would send to her, and then doing exchange programs and service-oriented group trips to Ghana. After she became a wife and a mother, she wanted to move into a business that was easier to run from wherever she was, and one that could have a more lasting effect. Thus, NSAA Adornments was born. She initially operated pop-up shops in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates, and then later on the West Coast in California, USA. Black women with African-themed or connected businesses have a very distinct relationship with the communities that they serve. Another often underexplored facet of this symbiotic relationship is the impact that operating these businesses has on the personal lives of the business owners. The neighborhoods that frame, both symbolically as well as geographically, their businesses provide a certain platform for these women to showcase their goods and products, initiatives and services and programs. The communities are like villages, and they oftentimes insulate and nurture and cultivate and promote these Black women's businesses. And their enterprises, dreams, and visions are able to thrive. How has this business impacted your personal life? Allison is the owner of Allison Rebecca Fashions, based in Abu Dhabi, United Arab Emirates. She created a stylish line of globally inspired clothing and accessories. She gives abayas, kimonos, and tunics a little bit of African flavor and charm. Allison's life has been impacted by the relationships that she's forged with her designers and customers and her suppliers. Most notably, she's been inspired by and has embraced the modesty of the Arab and Muslim fashion scene around her, so much so that she incorporates much of it into her own personal clothing style. Patrice Danielle is the chief operator and director at White Dove Global Prep, where she strives to build the very first college preparatory STEAM conservatory and elite sports training Christian high school for girls in Kigali, Rwanda. She notes that they are making small steps to complete their vision daily. She first came to Africa in 2009, where she volunteered in the Volta region of Ghana at an orphanage. Finally, she came to Rwanda in 2015 and was asked to come and help a failing school located in Kigali. The impact this mission has had on her life has been profound. Currently, she's raising 2 Rwandan children, and taking care of them is her number one priority. The school serves girls from the Democratic Republic of Congo, Burundi, Uganda, Eritrea, and Cameroon. Reid Hoffman, who's the co-founder of LinkedIn, once stated that an entrepreneur is someone who will jump off a cliff and assemble an airplane on the way down. Now, in the case of Black women, they do this with only a toothpick and a napkin. His comment alludes to the fact that usually Black women face a unique set of challenges when attempting to access capital, contracts, resources, and reliable networks while building their businesses. These factors are only compounded when the nature of that business is positioned outside the gaze or the lens of mainstream American society, as is the case with Afrocentric businesses. These barriers are often both racial and socioeconomic in nature. Building a sustainable business that doesn't conform to the normal, traditional Western standards and ideologies requires that Black women engage the village in a global sense, not just for the essentials of their businesses, but for the kinds of sociocultural support that for them can only be found in these concentrated pockets within their entrepreneurial ecosystems. How has this business impacted the community? Dr. Ruth Thompson Miller is a professor and co-author of Jim Crow's Legacy. In terms of her business's impact on the community, she says that being an academic with a focus on African and African American issues makes her intricately and infinitely connected to the community and to the diaspora as a whole. This business has reinforced her belief that without understanding Africa, there is no hope of unpacking all that is the African American experience. In fact, she believes that not only is developing a deeper understanding of self predicated on this field of study, but more importantly, without this understanding, we as a people are potentially lost. Ramunda Lark Young and her husband Derek Young are the owners of Mahogany Books. Their impact on their community is great in that they are the only Black-owned, African-centered bookstore in the Anacostia area of Washington, D.C. Their story is unique in that she and her husband were able to go from an online enterprise to a full-service brick-and-mortar operation with meeting rooms and open spaces that are accessible and available, and that they've grown their endeavor together, perfectly intertwining both their personal and professional lives, and even setting this precedent for their daughter. Black women entrepreneurs with African-centered businesses have actually begun to totally disrupt the traditional Western model of entrepreneurship. They are, by and large, cutting out the middleman. They are generating startup capital without the assistance of large banks, venture capitalists, large financial institutions, traditional lenders, and they're forming international collaborations and partnerships with other marginalized groups. And yet they are still managing to create, grow, viable, often thriving business enterprises. Now, in large part, this new business model is born out of necessity, because Black women are often locked out of access to valuable resources in competitive marketplaces. This is merely one example of the roadblocks that they face. What are some specific hurdles, obstacles, and barriers that you encountered on this road to entrepreneurship? Allison of Allison Rebecca Fashions noted that although her business is home-based in Abu Dhabi, her target market was not in that area entirely, nor either was it even on the continent. So her goal is to engage the broader diasporic community and to collaborate with other designers. She also mentioned that her business might be in transition as her job moves around. So she'd have to reconnect with different suppliers, potentially reroute her products and shipping. She also noted that the shipping is rather expensive. Some countries don't have postal addresses, and that makes getting the product to the consumers or even from the suppliers to herself a bit confusing at times. Patrice Danielle from White Dove Academy spoke candidly about her struggles in operating her school in Kigali, Rwanda. She noted that several years ago, all the funding for her school dried up, and she stopped taking a salary and is now currently in her second year working voluntarily as not only the leader of the school, but the newfound owner. Despite the obstacles, she continues to press on. She notes that it's been especially hard when trying to get help because people assume that as an American, there's no possible way that you don't have all the resources that you need. She loves Rwanda and has no intention of leaving anytime soon, especially with the two small humans that she's raising. She notes that it's extremely hard at times because she has to find people that she can trust and who understand what she's doing. And that although Rwanda is high on the list of African countries that does not have as much corruption, it's really hard to find people who aren't trying to gain something based on who they think that she is. It can become disheartening. Nevertheless, she's committed to her project, to her children, and to Rwanda as a whole. Where do we go from here? It's time to discuss future projections for enterprises. The answers that we've gotten so far have not only spoken of growing and expanding businesses, but they sent a very clear and a very visceral message about spreading the pervasive ideology of NOMO, or self-naming, self-defining, reclaiming a sense of agency, telling our own stories from our own perspectives, of creating spaces both in America and all around the world for African-descended women entrepreneurs to more strategically engage in a participatory sense. They spoke of coalitions. They spoke of reclamation of strength, resiliency, legitimacy, of creating counter-narratives that will continue to lead future generations to the same nuanced pathways of socioeconomic and, more important, sociocultural independence.
Do you have any future plans to expand or further develop your business connections, ties with diasporic Africans and African nations?
Yes, I do, but the timeline isn't clear right now. I would love to ultimately move to Ghana or South Africa, and I also want to start a school or vocational center, which is part of what inspired me to start this business. The young women and men that I employ are youth, young adults who were not able to necessarily go to school, but they have these talents with their hands and sewing and things. And so I pay them market rate retail so that they can have economic empowerment. I'd like to go further with that and make sure that they have the general educational skills that they need. I am an autism mother. I have two beautiful boys who are both on the spectrum, and my parents are aging. And so right now, those are the most pressing things in my life and on my plate. But I do hope and plan to expand at some point. And I know that whenever I'm ready to return to Ghana and really go further with my business, I know that that'll always be home and I'll always be welcome.
My name is Dalia Moore. I am president of Ubuntu Builders. I started my contracting company with one goal in mind. That was to service my family and my community. Like myself, many African Americans were affected by Hurricane Harvey and had extensive damage in their homes. Unfortunately, at the time, the city and FEMA was unable to provide us with adequate assistance. So I took it upon myself to learn basic carpentry skills so that I could repair my family home and those of the residents around me. My ultimate goal is to develop affordable, luxurious housing and to rebuild and restore my community so that my neighbors can continue living there for generations to come.
And so this project is essential to developing a broader understanding of the intersectionality between Black women's entrepreneurial drive and their level of connectedness or rootedness to Afrocentric ideologies, to Africa itself, to even an African-centered cosmology.